And let's do this.
Okay. Hi guys!
Hey everyone!
Today we're going to talk about 3 tools for conflict resolution.
Digging right in. Let's live vulnerably after all.
Yes, and to be vulnerable, we have had a lot of conflict.
We have. We've had a lot of conflict. I think... You know what? You go. I interrupted you.
That's okay. Interruption is conversation. So we have just had, as we said in our first video, we have lots of differences between the two of us, and sometimes it's difficult to connect with things that are different than you. It's difficult to communicate with those things and or humans, and so just being in the throes of marriage has really taught us about all aspects of communication and connection in the midst of conflict.
Yeah, indeed. I think the first thing about conflict to know is that conflict is normal. That's just something that we want to get out there, something that I think we, for a while, had quite a bit of shame about too, the fact that we had conflict. But if you're conflicting in a relationship, that's the nature of growth, is that there is going to be conflict. Now, there's a difference between healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict. So we want to dive into that just a little bit on this video. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is 3 tools for how to resolve conflict. Practical things that you can take into your relationships when there's a conflict. One of our mottos is that disagreement does not have to equal division. So if you disagree with someone on something and you have a conflict about it, that should not be an opportunity for dividing yourselves, but actually uniting and growing to a new place, not just compromise, but to a new place of growth with a new perspective for both of you that brings more wholeness and unity to the situation.
That's right, and that's really important to learn that just in marriage and also in any human interaction. So,
3 tools. Tool number 1.
Connecting touch. So it's very, very important to acknowledge all of this is on the health end. We're talking about healthy touching, invited touching, what's the word that you...
Consent?
Consentful touching. So I actually have a visual example just of what I mean by, kind of what we mean by you can have disagreement but still be connected. So, can you turn and face me?
Yes.
So if we're disagreeing, which has happened quite a bit, we can stand in our right. I can be, this is my perspective, I'm firmly here, that's your perspective, you're firmly here. But we don't have to do this to each other. We can stay connected, and that's something that's helped us a lot, is just so much of communication is body language. And there have been many times as a very emotional person that I don't have the capacity to make my words, sometimes I just can't explain in the midst of all my emotion. I need a little more space to articulate. And in the past, that's kind of manifested by my being like, go away, like pushing Coburn away, like please give me space, please leave me alone. And I've realized that the healthier I become, the more I can stand firm in what I'm saying and what I'm feeling and still hold his hand. And so when sometimes you don't have it inside of you to articulate what you're feeling, or to be like, I honestly cannot tell you what is wrong right now, but I can show you that I'm seeking to value the connection by just holding your hand or just giving you a hug. One thing I love is when
so funny.
I love explaining the why, so I do it still in a bit of layman's terms, but just there have been studies where when you hold a person or when you're being held for 20 seconds, which is a nice embrace, your brain actually starts producing different chemicals than it does when you're upset. So your brain can actually help your body calm when you just decide to take control and be like, I know we're arguing, but I value the connection. So I'm gonna just hold you and touch you, and your brain is like, okay, I actually am safe.
For a while when we were having a disagreement, this happened a lot while we were in Seattle last year, we had basically 2 facing seats. We had like our love seat on one end that faced, where we watched TV, and then we had like another little bench, sort of couch, And we would naturally gravitate to actually sitting on those opposite seats. And the conflict would actually get more heated, and it would get worse. You know, it would be easier to dissolve or devolve into more disrespectful communication and not hearing the other person. And I think it was a real game changer for us when we realized, hey, proximity matters and our body language matters. So we actually started having any sort of disagreement start with like an invitation to sit next to the other person and like just physically unify in some way, even if it was just holding a hand for a second, to actually establish, hey, I'm valuing this connection first and foremost here.
Yeah, and that's what it has to be. You have to be not forcing a connection, but the touch has to be communicating, I value you and I want to connect.
It's rooted in love, you know.
Yes.
For all of you dating couples, engaged couples, married couples, we challenge you this week, if you start to find yourself come into a conflict, to try this. Just go sit on the couch next to them and grab the other person's hand, or some sort of unifying touch. I guarantee you'll see a difference made in the way that you conflict.
Yes, that's very good.
Number 2, second tool for resolving conflict.
Evaluating the disconnection.
What is your position? Where are you standing in this conflict? Not necessarily physically, but what are you believing in this conflict that is actually contributing to this disconnection? Take a good hard look, evaluate it, even if this means, you know, leaving the room for a second to evaluate what your part is in the disconnection. And oftentimes you're going to find this is rooted in some sort of belief about yourself or about the other person in the situation. Now, I recognize this is it's a very weighty topic. False beliefs and, you know, how our beliefs about people and ourselves shape the world around us, and shape, you know, our actions and words in the world around us. That's so much to get into, which we will get into in other videos. We'll get into it in more blogs. But for the purpose of conflict resolution, we just want to give a couple pieces of insight on how your belief about the other person, about yourself, contributes to the disconnection. So a healthy conflict is going to involve evaluating that.
Yeah, that's really important, just to be able to be aware of the why. So kind of looking for the why, and like, because I've realized in our conflict, there's many times where at the end I'm like, I have no idea why I was feeling so disconnected. I don't know where that came from. And conflict invites a lot of just churning deep emotional things. Like, so things from childhood might be affecting why it bothered me the way that Coburn looked at me that time. And it's just really being self-aware and evaluating the disconnection.
An example of this, because we do go through this a lot, an example of this is, I think even just yesterday, I snapped. We were in the car, and I was like, okay, you know, stop asking so many questions. And she was like, gosh, you got really snappy. And I took a second to pause, and I had to say, okay, I'm recognizing that I was feeling stressed because I was trying to check something on my phone and I wasn't able to, I wasn't connecting, wasn't getting service, and then I started stressing myself out about how I need an answer to this certain question. And so when another question was thrown at me, I was suddenly at the overwhelmed, like, breaking point, so to speak, and I snapped. Now, that is just one small little example of what it looks like to evaluate what is causing the disconnection. The disconnection was between us in some way, but we had to diagnose the fact that there was an overwhelming feeling that was coming in. That my belief in the situation was that her voice was just another question that I had to solve, and I didn't have the capacity for it anymore. And so that is key to recognizing why there's disconnect and actually proceeding with conflict in a healthy way.
Yeah, it's really important. And then our third
point
is adjusting your tone.
This one seems like it should be easy, and we're just telling you from experience, it's not been easy for us a lot of times.
Kind of a fun and extremely recent example of that is in filming, doing some first takes of some of our videos today. I was just hearing my own voice back to Cobra, and I was like, okay, like, well, you did this and you did this. And in my mind, when I was saying it, I was just trying to point out different, like, things that I noticed. But on the camera, I heard my own voice being very critical. And so it's really important to just consider the tone of which you are raising conversation, even. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, yeah, so this might seem like just a communication principle. And one of the things that you hear a lot, and what we heard a lot even going into marriage, for conflict resolution was communicate. And we were finding ourselves going, okay, we're communicating. I'm communicating by yelling at the other person
I'm
and
telling you everything I'm feeling.
Yes.
I'm being very vulnerable.
Yes, and communication, just the word communication, doesn't always look healthy. So we're trying to dive a little deeper with these three, recognizing that communication is body language, belief, and voice. And I hope these three tools are going to give you just a few things to think about as you conflict this week or in the coming weeks, and recognize that voice has a lot to do with it. So to get back to the tone point that we were bringing up, communication is not just in the words that you're saying, it's in the way that you're saying it. And I have a really hard time with this because I'm very direct and I'm used to just kind of saying what I need and saying what I think and not really worrying about any of the other contextual factors to it. And my sweet wife here is very aware of the tone that I take when I'm saying something because that communicates so much else in a situation besides just the word that I'm saying. What I also recognize, I'm sorry, did you have something to say? What I also recognize is true for a lot of couples is that one party in the couple often values words more and the other party values voice more. And that's for a lot of couples that we know, and that's us too. We value words and we value the tone of voice, but we usually will hear one or the other first. So I'll always hear the words first, and Alicia will always hear the tone first.
Yes.
So recognize when that might be happening in your relationship, and then have a gentle, respectful conversation about the best ways to communicate with each other.
Yeah, just be willing to adapt. And it really just does come down to valuing the connection. And when you do that, you're willing to make different approaches, you're willing to take different words and perspectives into account. But it's so important in the face of conflict and disagreement to just communicate, I care about connecting with you.
Yeah, and the connection is the number one priority in that conflict. Because remember, disagreement is going to happen. Conflict is going to happen.
Yes.
You know, a plant that's growing, you need to have a few storms to make that plant stronger and actually grow taller and grow, more strong and more rooted. And that's a natural part of life. But remember, disagreement does not have to equal division. You can actually come together in unity through disagreement.
Yeah. Cool.
To recap, 3 tools.
Tool 1. Do you remember?
Yes, of course I
don't remember. That's what I'm trying to
You
ask
got it.
you. Coburn.
Oh, it's okay. Sorry.
This isn't a joke.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Connecting touch. This is what
Oh
I'm
my
doing.
gosh, that was
I was
my
trying
thing.
to give you a hint.
I was like, why are you doing
come
this?
on.
Connecting touch. Number 2 is for you to say.
It is. Do you remember? I don't remember.
Good God above. Number 2 is evaluating
the disconnection. I looked at my note for that one.
Number 3.
Adjusting your tone. You just saw a really vulnerable moment, which is the whole point of these. I love you.
I love you too.
Okay.
Let's have some connection.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Okay. That's your homework assignment this week too, is those 3 points that clearly we had a struggle remembering just now. Let us know too. Let us know how it goes. If you post on social media about what you're learning, use the hashtag #LiveVulnerably. We'd love to feature you in our stories or on our social page.
Yeah.